What if the worst thing that ever happened to you was actually the best thing in disguise? What if the moments you labeled as tragic were, in fact, the very keystones of your greatest salvation? This is a story about that possibility. A story about a man who understood the intricate and often invisible tapestry of fate. In a quiet valley, nestled between rolling green hills, lived an old farmer named Elias. He was a simple man, known less for his possessions and more for his unshakable peace, while his neighbors rode the turbulent waves of daily life, celebrating triumphs with loud feasts and lamenting sorrows with bitter complaints. Elias remained a calm sea. He greeted every sunrise with the same quiet gratitude, whether it promised a bountiful harvest or a coming storm. His son, Leo, a strong and spirited young man, often found his father's tranquility puzzling, but deeply respected it. The pride of their small farm was a magnificent stallion named Storm. He was strong, fast, and intelligent, the finest horse in the entire valley. The villagers often advised Elias to sell him, telling him the fortune he could make would secure his family for life. But Elias would just smile and shake his head. One morning, the unthinkable happened. The latch on the stable gate had broken during the night, and Storm was gone. The villagers gathered at Elias's farm, their faces a mixture of pity and smugness. "Oh, Elias, what a terrible misfortune," they said. "If only you had listened to us and sold him. Now you have nothing." Elias, looking out toward the empty hills where Storm had vanished, simply replied, "Misfortune. Perhaps. All I know for certain is that the stable is empty today." A week passed. Then, one evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the sky, a familiar silhouette appeared on the ridge. It was Storm, but he was not alone. Trotting gracefully behind him were 5 wild horses, their coats shining in the twilight. They followed Storm right into the open corral, as if he were their king. The villagers, hearing the commotion, rushed to see. Their pity instantly turned to awe and envy. "Elias, you are the luckiest man alive," they exclaimed. "What a blessing!" 1 horse left, and 6 returned. Elias, calmly securing the corral gate, offered the same measured response. "A blessing. Perhaps. All I know for certain is that the stable is full tonight." In the following days, Leo took on the challenge of taming the new horses. He was a gifted horseman, but one of the wild mares was especially spirited. In a flash of untamed energy, she bucked and threw Leo to the ground. He landed awkwardly, and a sharp crack echoed through the air. His leg was badly broken. As the village doctor set the bone, the neighbors gathered once more, their voices now dripping with sorrowful judgment. "You see," they whispered to each other, "those horses were not a blessing, they were a curse. Such a strong young man, now crippled. Poor Elias." As Elias sat by his son's bedside, he heard their words but remained unmoved. He looked at his son's pained face and said softly, "A curse, we do not know. For now, my only task is to help you heal." Not a month later, a shadow fell over the valley. Drums echoed from the capital, and royal emissaries rode into the village square. The kingdom was at war. A decree was read aloud. Every able-bodied young man was to be conscripted into the king's army immediately. A great wailing rose from the village as families were torn apart. Sons hugged their mothers goodbye, their faces etched with fear. The conscription officers went from door to door, their lists in hand. When they arrived at Elias's farm, they saw Leo resting outside, his leg bound tightly in a cast. They looked at their list, looked at the boy, and without a second thought, stamped his name with the seal of exemption. They turned and left. Leo was the only young man in the entire village who was spared from the war. The villagers now looked at Elias with a reverence reserved for a prophet. They finally saw the pattern they had been blind to. That evening, as the sun set, Elias sat with Leo and shared the lesson he had lived his entire life. He explained that the lost horse, which seemed like a tragedy, was the very event that brought them a fortune. The new horses, which seemed like a curse when Leo was injured, became the source of his salvation. Each event was a link in a chain, And you could never understand the purpose of one link without seeing the whole. Life, he told his son, is not a series of isolated good and bad events. It is a single, continuous story. To despair over a difficult chapter is to forget that the story is not yet over. To become arrogant in a triumphant one is to forget that challenges may lie ahead. The secret is to walk through it all with a patient heart and a grateful spirit. Do not be so quick to label your days. The seed of your greatest joy may be planted in a moment of your deepest sorrow. Trust the unfolding. Everything happens for a reason, and in the fullness of time, all will be revealed.